learn together. So thank you for the nice intro, Jameson. It's been such a pleasure to get to know Paul and Jameson and Nate and talk about this intersection between research and practice. And I'm between the kind of hardcore academia and I'm a translational researcher. So I try to take stuff that's almost impossible for a kind of normal human being to read, that makes their brain go into gridlock. And I try to make it user-friendly and apply story to it and help it come alive in a different way. So that's been my role for the past 4 or 5 years. I'm by training a behavioral geneticist. I worked in a big twin study in London, the Twins Early Development Study, which is the longest running and largest longitudinal study on children's cognitive abilities, behavior and language development, looking at basically nurture and nature and how they interact over time. So I'm a big time science nerd. I love it. And I think there are incredibly important applications to the field of human health and well-being. And as we know, when we catch kids early on in life, we have a much greater ability to impact them. I love sports, tennis. I played competitive tennis. I played D1. I played professionally for a while. I still play at a national level in the kind of middle-aged lady national circuit. But I have 3 young boys, 3 teenage boys who also love sports. And I just believe it is the most powerful vehicle for children who love sports and play sports to really learning key life skills that you just don't get in the classroom that are applicable to life. So with that, I'll start into my presentation with my newfound share screen skills. Here is my, oopsie, and I think I didn't set it to the beginning, so I'm going to go back to the beginning up here. All right, and slideshow. We can start. There we go. All right. So this is just what I called our presentation today. I think it's not only this period of time we're in, but I think we're looking at some the ramifications are likely longer term for what we're in the middle of right now, and the use of virtual technology to learn and to be together. I think there's going to be an aspect of that for an extended period of time. We don't know how long that is. So today we're going to talk about some, this is a slide deck that could go about 2 hours. I've extended it to 2.5, but we're going to try to move through it quickly today, and I'll try to hit some key points that Jameson and Wen said were important. So today we'll talk about a quick overview of the data. I've just sent Jameson a research paper on this, published in 2020 at King's College London. Who's at risk? We'll talk about the science of learning and development, some basics, relationships and the importance of safe and trusted adults, which you know all about. Getting oxygen mask on first for coaches. We'll talk a bit about the neurobiology of stress, which is what I spent most of my time at Johns Hopkins on, working with a team on the early life origins of disease. ACEs, and then also resilience and healing, which is that's the most important topic here, because this is what we all are hoping to affect in our children. So in terms, emotions that in the times of quarantine. So all of these emotions, my friend Mark Brackett, who runs the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, did a survey of 5,000 people a few weeks ago when they first instituted the quarantine. And of course, fear and anxiety were at the top of the list for reasons we can all understand. And we've seen effects in kids also. That manifest as anxiety and depression, which sometimes show up as fatigue. And so these symptoms are things that we as parents, because we're the only ones who are really spending time with our children right now, really need to be on the lookout for. So what we know is there are all these major factors. Flipping the narrative to thinking about opportunities when we're in the middle of an extraordinarily difficult time is one key theme that I'll hopefully reinforce throughout this, because in times of great challenge come great opportunities as well. One particular item of note, healthcare workers are particularly at risk in the midst of this crisis for lots of different reasons. But as you know, your athletes, children of healthcare workers may require particular focus and really just keeping a watchful eye out. In previous quarantines, they looked at various viral quarantines. Children who have been quarantined are 4 times likelier than non-quarantined children to experience symptoms of PTSD. And there you can read more about that in the paper that I sent, but that's an important odds ratio to be aware of. And it looks like I didn't finish my point number 2. Sorry, I put this slide together yesterday afternoon. Healthcare workers are particularly at risk. Parents, this is very interesting. Parents of single children are more at risk. And my assessment of this is that because single children don't have siblings to play with, they're on their own, it just becomes a little bit more of a difficult situation to keep them entertained, for them to be entertained. So I think that reflects back on the parents and in the parents really trying to keep things moving. There seems to be a protective factor in 3 or more children. So, and again, I think that's to having company and siblings to play with. We've seen increased rates of abuse, and we'll talk about ACEs later: emotional, physical, intimate partner, and child abuse. So this is another reason why it's good that we're covering ACEs right now, and you've already got a strong start on your trauma-informed coaching work. So we'll start here with the science of learning and development. And there are basically 3 huge principles to know here. A, nature operates via nurture, the science of epigenetics. Our genes are just recipes for proteins, which are the active biological molecules in our bodies. It's really the nurture piece, the influence of outside variables, sleep, stress, exercise, safe, trusted adult relationships can be a massive buffer to stress, as we know. But all the things that come in from the outside shape how our genes are expressed. And that's why if anyone ever says anything about the nature versus nurture debate, you can say, guess what? Nature operates via nurture through the science of epigenetics. The second big principle is what's real in the mind is real in the body. So as I talk about stress, it's really perceived stress that matters, because our narratives, the stories that we tell ourselves or about the world around us, is the basis by which our biochemistry operates. Our brains latch on to certain narratives or certain scenarios that have probably been played out in the past, and that cause a biochemical chain reaction. And this is basically this is the basis for both PTSD, where a certain situation takes our minds into a place where there's sort of a trigger event, and we go down this rabbit hole of cognition, of physiology, of mood. This same dynamic works in the other direction, back to the power of story. The positive story we tell ourselves. Yeah, that was hard, but guess what? I was able to overcome it, and I did it by getting help from someone, or I did it by figuring out a solution. This narrative piece is really important, because what's real in the mind is real in the body, and when things are positive, it creates a positive upflow of biochemistry. Third, mental and physical health, as it tends to be quite segmented, with kind of physical health getting all the attention and mental health kind of over here on the side. That dynamic, I think, is changing. It's being destigmatized. Many top athletes have really stepped up to talk about their stories, which is really important. We continue to need more of that. As a physiological level and neurobiological level, the same molecules that affect physical health affect mental health, and it's really hard as scientists to pull these two apart. So as we think about physical health affects mental health. Inflammation in the body affects inflammation in the brain, and vice versa. So we've really got to think about a 2-in-1 package, this kind of dynamic system. And this is just a figure, the Gordian knot. You can't, this is nature and nurture. You can't pull them apart. Same as mental and physical health. We're a integrated system. This field of functional medicine is the one that I really ascribe to. One thing affects another. And what's good for one thing is typically good for another thing. And what's not good for one thing is typically not good for another thing. So, and it really gets down to a lot of the basics that we know. There are things that we have been able to see on fMRI scanners and epigenetic gene expression tests now, but it's really a lot of the basics and relationships is a key one of those things. Here is a DNA strand. And what we know is that nurture shapes nature through the science of epigenetics. I talked about that and I won't stay there long, but what's important for you to know is that our genome, our epigenome, is always, always changing every nanosecond, 24/7, and it's shaped by all of the ingredients that go in to our recipe. So the things we eat, the sleep, the exercise, the relationships, the love we feel, the value we feel, all these emotions shape our biochemistry, and these shape how our genes are expressed. Even twins, and I saw this on the twin study, no twins ever correlated 100%. No twins are ever exactly alike. And you look at these two on the cover of Nat Geo, and there are some subtle differences. There are physiological differences, there are behavioral differences, and in all the twin studies done over time, you see no two twins are ever 100% alike. And this is because epigenetics shapes our individual differences, and how we our experience of our worlds around us shape us in unique ways that are specific to us. And really this focus on the individual child and personalizing those relationships and knowing their stories is incredibly important. If you look at all the behavioral genetic studies compressed together, you find that the effect of nurture of the environment is greater than the effect of nature. Behavioral genetics is comprised of three main variables. There's heritability, which is genetics. There's shared environment, which is environmental influences that make two people more alike. And then there is non-shared environment, which is environmental influences that serve to make two people more different. And in behavioral genetics, you're comparing identicals or fraternal twins who are both in utero at the same time, and had the same kind of in utero environment and same home environment, but the experience of the environment that really serves to individuate them further. But you find shared environment, non-shared environment bigger than the power of nature if you compress them all together. My PhD advisor, Robert Plomin, wrote a book called Blueprint last year. He's a really well-known, he was on the top 8 American Psychiatric Association's top 100 scientists of the past century. It's a very good book, and it was his first kind of book for non-academics, but it's called Blueprint, and I highly recommend it. So it's nature via nurture, as we've discussed. I won't stay there, but really important to remember, if our DNA is the hardware, epigenetics is the software that's getting updated and rewritten all the time. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's close enough. It's operating 24/7, so it's always happening. There's always upside potential in taking a moment, shifting the narrative, changing the biochemistry, and letting those effects continue to flow downstream. This updating is really good news. It happens throughout the lifespan, so it's happening to us. You're going through epigenetic changes, as am I, as you're listening, as I'm talking, but it starts prenatally. And the software updating, and it goes through all the way through the end of the line. So healthy ingredients in our recipe for optimal health: exercise, good food, mindfulness, meditation. This is a really extraordinarily powerful tool to teach kids early that helps them down-regulate their sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response. Getting them to learn to use their lungs and be able to calm down at any particular point in time to recenter is an extraordinarily important tool. It's something that I use personally, and it's been a life changer. And then friendship, nature. These are our 3 boys. That's a few years ago. Jack, Charlie, and Wyatt out in Idaho on a family camping trip. I'm sure I had a bag of candy for them to get them to carry the big pack. But time in nature, friendship, and just being outdoors and moving your bodies is really all really good things. Sleep, really important. Brain development, memory consolidation. The hippocampus is working overtime to bring new memories and integrate them into existing memories and schemas overnight. Important for mood and emotional health. That's, there's an effect of different neurotransmitters and the stress hormone cortisol, growth via growth hormone, And it basically heals. Sleep is powerful for healing both of our adaptive and innate immune system. Adaptive is the one that we kind of, when things come in from the outside, we can learn to fight them off, like the coronavirus. We can develop antibodies and fight them off. The innate immune system is one for things that are basically happening on the inside, and these are the ones that we should have from the get-go. So fragmented, disrupted sleep quality is really important. I wrote an article on sleep that I think Jameson may have sent out to you guys. You can think of sleep as like the cleanup crew for your brain. It's really important to protect that and not only get enough quantity, but the quality of sleep is really important too. And there are some things that you can do in my article that show you how to kind of set yourself up for success sleeping wise. But it makes a big difference for every single thing that we do. And if we think about one thing in our life that's really important that controls physiology, sleep we really thought of as the master dial, that it affects all of the other little dials. If it was like a big sound mixing machine, sleep's like the master dial. So really, I encourage you to read the article and really protect your sleep and talk about that with children as well, because children seem to they believe that they don't need sleep, and I think the more that they can get the message that sleep is not sleep is something that they want to do, and they get the message from different adults that they value and trust and love, it will be something that will become a part of their recipe. Here we go. Combined with loneliness, sleep deprivation, and the impact on immunity is even worse. Loneliness is another issue we can talk about another time, but it can be more impactful than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for your biology. So these ingredients are really important. Love, trust, safety, support, and belief, and help children feel seen and valued, and to really feel felt. And it sounds kind of goofy. I was there when Dan Siegel said this in a talk that I was in, and but when you feel felt, you feel that somebody really sees you, it really does change everything, and instantaneously on a dime. And I think we all know how that feels. And we're having one of those moments and we just really feel like somebody's right there with us. So this gets us into sorry, that's my Mickey Mouse watch. I just want to make sure I stay on top. Relationships. These two slides are a little bit chunky, but Pam Cantor, who runs Turnaround for Children, I think Paul knows her. She's a psychiatrist based in New York. She and a team of people, including Rich Lerner, who I'm working with on the Whole Child Coaching Initiative, wrote these papers that were published in Applied Developmental Science a couple of years ago. But it's really all about thinking about whole child development, not just about, can this child do their math? Can they do their English? Can they do this? Can they do that? It really is an integrated system. We as human beings are integrative systems, and that's just how we operate. And so part of this system, we don't operate in isolation. We operate in the context of relationships. We're in utero in relationship with our mother, right? We hear her heartbeat, we feel her stress levels, we digest the things that she eats. We're in relationship from the very, very start. And what we know is that as we are out in the world, there's something called emotion contagion. And stress is contagious just as positivity is contagious. And so as we think about health and optimizing outcomes for our kids and for ourselves and for our families, thinking about these relational dynamic systems as a whole, and the importance of the emotional climate in setting ourselves up for success. Messages are heard much more effectively when there's a positive emotional climate. Early attachment is incredibly important. Let's see, integrating developmentally positive relationships. This is coach, athlete, and adversity through the biological embedding of stress exerts profound effects on behavior, development, learning, and health. This is the really important part. So adversity is bad. We would get rid of all adversity, not all adversity, because a certain level of adversity is good. And there's something called eustress, EUSTRESS, which, you know, we need a certain amount of adversity to perform and to raise our game and to learn and to grow. Exercise is eustress. But too much stress or chronic stress is bad, and it can really reshape our physiology in ways that are bad for the long haul, maladaptive, and cause some outcomes, which I'll go into later. But it can be buffered and prevented by healthy adult engagement and these stressors that we are able to rise above. We get to add that into our narrative, and these can foster these self narratives of resilience, of capability, of confidence. And, you know, sports is just about the best setting for these types of things to develop. As you win, you lose, you know, grit it out. And it's about getting the right message and coaches grabbing those teachable moments to really foster the development of resilience. Malleability and plasticity. This is just what we were talking about earlier about epigenetics. We are nurture shapes nature. This happens from conception. I mean, there's some hair splitting detail around, you know, maternal biology. Preconception makes a difference as well in terms of factors that can predispose a child to, you know, obesity or having a different type of metabolism. But really, it's really the, you know, conception through, you know, and early development are really the core periods of time that things can have a much bigger signal size. Adolescence as well. It's another critical period in the brain where major changes are possible. We are always adapting. And this is actually my tennis coach, Vesa. He got kind of pulled out. He just got a little wider. But this is about the importance of relationships, and this is him having a moment with an athlete, and what's happening in this moment where you're looking at it and there's intensity that the athlete is really trying to focus on what he's saying and feeling it. As this is happening, neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine are the way that they are being read and expressed are changing. And at the same time, hormones like cortisol, the stress hormone, are going down, and hormones like oxytocin, the love hormone, are going up. This human connection is so fundamental to who we are, and oxytocin is the hormone that really has shown up all over the place in every study that we've looked at relative to human attachment. So as this behavior is playing, he's making sure that this guy is hitting a good clean volley. There's a lot going on under the skin that we don't see. Coach mental health and wellness. This is essential, and this is something that really hasn't been integrated in what I've been able to assess from looking at least the literature on the academic side of things. And in some programs, also some top-notch programs, there's been less of a focus on the coach side of things and their wellness than I would have imagined. And this is a really, really important focus, because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So, you know, there's at the bottom of this slide is the Back to Basics series. Are kind of 8 ingredients that go into a recipe for taking good care, but that's more of an individual level. One really important initiative that's going on right now is a mental wellness for coaches initiative. UC Anschutz here in Denver is putting that on, the Johnson Depression Center. I'd love to put you guys in touch with Matt Mishkin, who runs it, and they're piloting coach mental wellness workshops this spring. It was going to be in person, now it's going to be virtual, but they really want to equip coaches with tools around taking care of themselves, having some basic mental health skills in their toolkit to be able to deal with things. You know, what do you do if you become aware that an athlete has considered committing suicide, or if an athlete is incredibly anxious or depressed? You know, how do you help them integrate these skills like mindfulness meditation, gratitude, so forth into their into their own daily recipe. So there's some details around social media, trauma, performance that they haven't put any context to yet, that will be coming out over the months to come. But I'll make sure to put you in touch so that you can understand what they're doing, because I think this is a really important topic. And it starts with awareness and knowing, as coaches, knowing where you are. This is from Mark Brackett's Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Mark's book, Permission to Feel, just came out the beginning part of this year, I believe, late last year, but it's excellent and it's well worth reading as well. He's a collaborator on our Whole Child coaching initiative. So I've got, it's 25 till, I'll try to go for, I'm going to move through this really quickly. Individual differences are the rule, not the exception. So we've got to go one-on-one and really understand each child one at a time. We are a neurodiverse species. Orchids and dandelions, this is something that really relates to biological sensitivity to context. Some children and adults need perfect environmental conditions to survive and thrive, and others are like the dandelion growing in the rock. They just hang in there and they plow through. Really, if you think about the growth potential for the orchid, it's massive. The dandelion is going to be more hardy and kind of keep the center part of the course. The difference between a beautiful orchid and a orchid that just can't make it because the conditions are wrong. So those are the children who sometimes require more attention, but the upside potential is even more. The brain is cross-wired. I don't know if talking about left brain, right brain, you can talk about that, but there's a huge asterisk, and our brain is an integrated system. I read this week that, and I think it was this article that you sent me, Paul, the Wired article on the microglia cells, that these are called neuromyths. Neuromyths are stories where the train got out of the station, like partly true, but not totally true. But one neuromyth is that we only use 10% of our brain or 5% of our brain or whatever. That neuromyth came from the finding that neurons comprise about 10% of our brain cells, and microglia comprise about 90%. And so neurons are not the only things working in our brain. There's a lot of other stuff going on behind the background that makes a big difference in us being able to optimize performance. Neuromyths, we'll go through these left and right. Neuroplasticity is this epigenetic malleability, neurogenesis. We're growing new cells all the time. There are sensitive periods where opportunities exist for teaching due to the trajectory of the brain development. I think about all of, zero through, through late teen years as a big giant sensitive period. And beyond that too. There are big individual differences, of course, but it's hard to fine tune what a sensitive period might be for one child, because it's going to be, what we know it's going to vary between children. Emotions and thoughts shape each other, influencing everything. Emotions are like if we have a big canvas, emotions are like the priming of the canvas. They affect everything that we think, our thoughts, our creativity, everything that arises from our kind of prefrontal cortex gets colored by our emotions and how we're feeling about things. This is a great quote. I've learned that people will forget what you said and what you did, but they will never forget how they made you feel. I'm going to skip through building blocks, but this is basically bottom line. These skills in the bottom of the pyramid: attachment, stress regulation, self-regulation. These things are fundamental to everything else that comes past that. And then underneath this healthy development level, the bottom level, is mental and physical health. So we need mental and physical health, and we need these really core basic skills that for children to develop into the independent, civic contributors that we want them to be, and to have the lives that they choose and deserve. Neurobiology of
Don't,
Stress.
Sheila, I just wanted
Yeah.
to say, don't feel too rushed because I think you have us all absolutely captivated. So,
Thank you. Neurobiology of Stress. Here is the zebra or mammalian cousin. Um, Zebra is always on the lookout in a part of his brain for this guy, for this guy just to make sure that he survives another day. So these are HPA axes, or hypothalamus is always on the lookout for things that could go wrong and ready to react. So for the zebra, this is his nemesis. And when he hears the lion roar, he runs. So all of his energy, the cortisol levels spike, all of his energy goes into his large muscles group, away from his brain, away from his prefrontal cortex, the stuff that was going on that he was processing, if he was digesting his food or connecting with his zebra, it's called a zeal of zebras, actually, zebra pack. All of those social interactions and digestion and cellular repair go by the wayside, so he can just get out of there and live another day. So our zebra friend does, I believe. We didn't get the picture of that last image 90 seconds later. So we assume he survived, but he's back on the savannah, munching grass, digesting, cellular repair, nurturing his young. And what happens is these cortisol levels, after about half an hour or so, should start to go back down again. That's how we're built. Stress is a necessary and important part of life. It's something that we all need in our life, not only to be able to respond to emergency, but this eustress that we talked about earlier. We need a certain amount of stress to grow and push ourselves to just become our best selves, to be better at what we do and grow in the ways that are important to us. Robert Sapolsky wrote this book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. He's a Stanford neurobiologist. He also wrote a great book called Behave, which I totally nerded out on a couple of years ago when it came out, but it's an excellent book as well, all about the neurobiology of behavior. Not all stress is bad, the right level for the right person, and different contexts can bring about different stress responses for people. So, there's being an orchid, and somebody can be an orchid in one context and a dandelion in another. So it's important to remember that and know, what those contexts are for them. But if we think about stress, there's this optimal level of performance, and if we think about athletes, finding that right line between, where is the peak of the performance curve for them, what's going to get them there so they can really bring their A game. This is our son Jack's boot. With 3 teenage boys, we've got a collection of boots and crutches and braces, like you wouldn't imagine, in our storage area. But here you can see something's wrong with Jack. You can't really see something, it's only a boot, but stress is something that we can't see. We can see this, we can see a cut, we can see something that needs a Band-Aid or antibiotic ointment, but we can't see stress. So you have to really be aware and look out for the signs. There are 3 types of stress as defined by the American Academy of Pediatrics. There's acute stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress. Acute stress is like the zebra on the savannah. There's some kind of an emergency and you've got to deal with it right now. All the adrenaline and norepinephrine and cortisol converts into sugar to fuel the large muscles and to get something done really, really quickly. Normal human response, cortisol should go back down again, start going back down again after roughly a half an hour. Tolerable stress is the kind we talked about where there's a stressful event, but it's manageable, and either there's an adult to buffer the situation to help the child see a way through, or the child figures out something on their own. But for children, typically the number one buffering ingredient in the recipe is having a safe, trusted adult to help support them through it and see their way through. And this tolerable stress builds resilience. Toxic stress is the kind that's chronic, where the foot on the gas pedal, the zebra's outrunning the lion, but the lion never goes away. And so, and it could even be a virtual lion. If it was a zebra with PTSD, that same biological stress response is pervasively going on throughout the body, throughout the brain. It can reshape the structure and function of brain centers that are incredibly important for learning and for life. So taking chronic stress, toxic stress, figuring out how to buffer it. And there are the lifestyle ingredients, but there's this relational piece is critical. And often coaches are seeing children in contexts where they're able to be incredibly insightful and impactful in a way that parents aren't able to be at home. And if a child is coming from a home where there are, you know, massive challenges within the home, a coach can help down-regulate sympathetic nervous system, help teach the child some skills, help the child feel safe, and turn toxic stress into tolerable stress. And this has longer-term health ramifications as well. Cortisol is the stress hormone that we know about, converts into glucose. It has blood sugar implications over the long haul too, and this is one reason that it really can escalate rates of chronic disease over time. It can affect mood, depression, anxiety. Here are the brain centers that stress really, we know to have an impact on prefrontal cortex, which is executive function, self-regulation, attention, hippocampus, learning and memory, and the amygdala. Why did this go wonky on me? The amygdala. So the amygdala is the brain's emotional smoke detector. That's the one that tells us when to feel fear and how to react. And then the one before that is, and this gets back to the youth survey of risk behavior, youth risk behavior survey. And this is the nucleus accumbens, where there's it's motivation, reward, and addiction are, nucleus accumbens seems to have disappeared. But this is the brain center that basically, with chronic stress, with that hormonal effect, the nucleus accumbens basically becomes much less sensitive to stress hormones. So what this looks like is youth going out and needing to engage in more intense, more risky, more dopamine producing activities to get the same dopamine hit that they did before. So the nucleus accumbens, it operates on the dopamine system. And when chronic stress is a part of the mix, the nucleus accumbens shifts and it becomes, it shows up in behavior as more risk behavior for kids. ACEs. So we know what ACEs are. You've seen all of that. It's abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. It's not just these 10 things, because what's real in the mind is real in the body. And people ask sometimes, does an ACE have to happen just once, or does it have to happen for a year or 10 years or 4 times? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's real for the kid or real for the person. So what we believe to be true is true in our minds and in our bodies. And so one impactful experience can derail a person for an extended period of time if there are not any buffering experiences to really help them get the train back on the tracks. Cortisol is the key hormone here as well, but there are others, but all kind of have an inflammatory pathway, which is adverse for the brain and the body. One thing I just want to say on inflammation, and this is the same as stress, because our bodies operate as systems, inflammation it's a necessary and important part of how our bodies function. We need to, when we have, fall down and skin our knee, we need a bunch of inflammatory molecules to go to the site and help heal it. They serve a purpose. It's the excess inflammation that causes a problem. So as far as ACEs, 4 is the cutoff for risk for adverse childhood experiences. It can be lower. I've seen for younger kids, I've seen a 3 cutoff, but it really is, what matters is what's happening with that individual child. So if you look at the kind of big ACE study, the Kaiser CDC study, for ischemic heart disease, if you had 4 more ACEs, more than double the odds ratio of having ischemic heart disease. For cancer, almost 2 times. COPT, lung disease, more than 2. Stroke, type 2 diabetes, escalation of blood sugar, Alzheimer's. There's an asterisk. This is the California study, not the Kaiser CDC study, but inflammation in the brain. One of the worst, one of the most I would say impactful ACEs in terms of, and I see it outlined in your summary, Jameson. One of the most impactful ACEs is bullying. This chronic stress from bullying can be, due to, LGBTQ, can be just a situation at school, but something that is chronic and that really has a major effect on a kid's view of himself, narrative of him or herself. Those kinds of things can really cause problems, and the body works as a system. So there's sort of this chain reaction of things that happen inside the brain and the body. Autoimmune disease, I'd say it's probably more than double. This is an older number, but increases the immune system backfiring on itself, emphysema, depression, and obesity as well. Risk-taking behavior, we talked about the nucleus accumbens. For a person with 4 or more ACEs is 12 times likelier to commit suicide. It's the number 10 cause of death in the US. 10 times likelier to try injection drugs, incarceration, alcoholic, to self-soothe, smoke, get pregnant as a teenager, high risk of having an accident. And 6 or more ACEs, you see an average 20-year lifespan decrement, premature mortality. And this is all this nature operating via nurture and this gene expression and kind of metabolization of life that really turns upside down in a human being and really causes profound loss of human potential. So teaching, as we look at this, risk-taking behavior, and some of our kids who are living in high-risk communities, difficult households, equipping them with skills to self-soothe in the moment, to sit down, to meditate, to be mindful, to say, you know what, I need to go out and take a walk, or I need to run, or I need to go hit a ball, something that helps get them out of that space into a healthier space, so it doesn't go down the path of injection drugs, alcohol, or obviously loss of life. Children who have 4 or more ACEs are 32 times more likely to have learning and behavior problems, double to 3 times risk of heart disease and cancer, drug use and suicide. 8 out of the leading causes of death of 10 correlate with 4 or more ACEs. So this is a JAMA Pediatrics paper, which I think I've sent to you, Jameson, but team sports associated with long-term mental health outcomes amongst individuals exposed to ACEs. The cutoff was not 4 here, so it wasn't the group that was necessarily at the very, very highest risk, but we did see an important correlation between team sports feeling a part of something bigger than themselves, which is what is hypothesized in the paper. I think there are many levels of it, and obviously the coach relationship is fundamental in all of this. But this is JAMA Pediatrics is an excellent high impact factor journal, and the fact that this was published in JAMA Pediatrics is very noteworthy, and I think presents a huge opportunity for all of us to really take this data and run with it. The big 3 of positive youth development. This is Rich Lerner's work at Tufts. The big 3 are positive and sustained relationships between youth and adults. So coach-athlete relationship, activities that build important life skills. Sports is doing that in so many different ways. And then opportunities for youth to go use these skills, both as participants and in leaders in valued activities around their homes and communities. So these are the big 3. The really important piece of this, these relationships must take place in the context of safety and trust, because without this, the potential positives fall away and can cause all kinds of downstream reactions that can move the neurobiology in the direction of toxic stress physiology. So safety and trust, antidote to toxic stress. Resilience and healing. So we talked about the whole child, the whole human being. It is really, we can't we can't segment out social and emotional learning and cognitive development, physical health, mental health, because they're all part of the same thing. We're an integrated functional system. Mental and physical health and exercise. It's exercisers. There's such a large literature on the association between exercise and mental and physical health. I'm not even going to go into it, but this is a very good study, a Lancet study that was done a couple of years ago. The neurobiology of exercise is the best magic pill we can take. And I did write a little article on that too, which Jameson will share, but it has the highlights. But there's a long list. And if we can make physical activity a part of the toolkit that kids go to over time as they get older, as they become adults and show their children how to deal with a stressful situation. This is a virtuous cycle. This is the best thing we can teach them how to do to really take care of themselves. This is from a public health standpoint. Chronic disease and mental health are our #1 health issue. 90% of our annual healthcare costs are mental and physical chronic health issues. The physical expenditures are, I believe, 2/3 of annual healthcare costs, which is almost 18% of GDP. And sedentary behavior, it's expensive, and 6 out of 10 adults in the U.S. have a chronic disease, and we know for sure that physical activity is something that people can do every day, and they don't have to go out and run a marathon. It's just about getting out, going for a walk, doing something, and making that a part of their recipe for every day. And with children, we have the power and the ability to shape these healthy trends in them at a time when it's really neurobiologically sticky in their brains, and associate exercise and physical activity with being with people that they like and love and trust. So backward mapping, this is like the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, to the AARP, retired people. If we go to the end of the line and look back at the things that facilitate healthy aging, healthy brain aging, which is where I'm 53, I'm 54 next week. And I'm all about brain health, man. I want to be functional and clear and communicative and be doing things with my grandkids. But if we look back at what helps that happen, it's having a strong sense of purpose, doing things that are meaningful, some reason to get out of bed in the morning, having strong relationships, social connections. And we talked about isolation being as or more dangerous than smoking a pack of cigarettes every day from a physiological standpoint. And then regular physical activity, which brings up all of the other things. It enhances creativity and cognitive clarity, and makes us, makes our moods better, less depression, anxiety, that make us better in relationships. So that's an important piece to remember also, and kind of, factoring that or integrating that into messaging in a way that makes sense for kids is, I think, really important. So given what science tells us, we need to think differently about educating the whole child, and coaches are a really, really, really important part of this equation. Our big aim is to build resilience and reduce net vulnerability, and thoughtfully develop context and people within those contexts that can help all youth thrive. This is just the research on youth sport participation, social, all these things that we know: perseverance, teamwork, discipline, leadership, confidence, and then mental and physical health, which is really incredibly important. Early roots. So this is my final slide, but if we look at the rocket ship on the launch pad on the left, and it's a slight adjustment in the rocket ship on the launch pad. We put it 1/4 of an inch off the mark, and by the time it gets up into outer space, that differential early on in life has turned into miles later on in life. And this is the analogy I'll draw about the importance of reaching kids early, in conveying important messages and health promoting messages and behaviors early in life, so that when they get to outer space, when they get to their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they remember, they have these positive behaviors that have carried with them throughout life, and they know they have tools in their toolkit to deal with whatever comes down the pike. So I went over, Mickey. It's 11:59. You've got 1 minute to ask questions.
I'll let you take over, Jameson and Wynn, but let me just say that you just summarized in an hour why everyone on this phone call gets up every day and still goes to work, whether that means at home or in yesteryear in our offices. So thank you. That was probably the best presentation I've seen in all this month of seeing online presentations and professional development. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. And yeah, I guess so everyone, please, I'm sure you saw my chat, but please stay on. And I guess, Sheila, do you have 30 like additional, some extra minutes to talk?
I have about 15 minutes. Is that all right?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So we'll, Wynn, I'll kind of throw it over to you to walk through some of the questions that came through. And Sheila, maybe we can follow up with some additional questions after this.
Absolutely.
To the ones that we don't get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Walker, for that presentation. That was
Sheila, please don't come back.
That was absolutely awesome. So we had a first question about from Andy Nielsen about the amygdala hijack. We talk a lot about that in our training, and from Andy, he would love to hear a little bit more about your knowledge for what that event may look like neurochemically, the amygdala hijack.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And what happens over time when we have a certain pattern of reactivity? Maybe there's some adverse experience that happens, or there's a story that we're telling ourselves that basically makes a message in our brain, an electric message, go down a certain pathway. The amygdala is this kind of primal brain structure that developed to keep us safe. It's the fear center, the reactivity center. It's the one that tells a zebra, get going, there's a lion right on your tail. And this is the reason we see all this kind of really overt, overreactive behavior in young children, because the pathway to the prefrontal cortex, which is up here, hasn't developed yet. And that develops over time. That's kind of roughly, is done with its developmental course by age 28. But a lot of that happens in the kind of middle childhood, teenage years, and the early 20s. So amygdala hijack is when the fear center is not properly connected, or the pathways are not there that have it go through the process of touching base with the prefrontal cortex. You can say, hey, guess what? It's only smoke, it's not fire. That's where the self-regulation piece comes in, where, if you can put a moment between, and help a child put a moment between a situation and the reaction to a situation, that is going to be gold for them. Just taking having a pause, the power of the pause to determine the left fork versus the right fork in the road. And so as we practice those behaviors, that amygdala hijack, which once just kind of overpowered everything, this impulsive move, can become this more, okay, I've got a decision to make. I feel really angry, or I want to deck that kid, or what have you, I want to run away or break something. And just pausing for a moment, just teaching them that, to have a moment to think about it, so they can make a choice that may not feel like what they want to do in the moment, but in the end is going to be the one that has the gold medal on it. That's what we're aiming for. So it's really about getting that prefrontal cortex online and having them repeat behaviors that can further strengthen that pathway, so that the prefrontal cortex becomes a much more important player in the game.
Great, thank you. So we had a couple of questions regarding, coaches and our role in supporting coaches. So we have a first question from Jameson here wondering about the value in screening our coaches' own experience with ACEs, and if you could speak to some considerations for exploring coach wellness in more detail.
So I think that, I don't, I think it's important for individuals who are working with children, particularly, to know their stories and to have, to some degree, integrated their stories into their kind of emotional schemas and how they see the world, just to have a sense for understanding, because without awareness, we don't have the information that we need to access more objective insights into the world around us. So I do think it's important. It can raise, some individuals may not want to go there, may not feel comfortable revealing these things. Some people may have even blocked experiences out. I mean, there's lots of examples of people really not remembering things, and it being a triggering event that helps to bring up a memory that happened a long time ago that they haven't thought about or put in a kind of a psychological closet somewhere. Nonetheless, these things are extraordinarily important, particularly for adults working with children, because it can show up in behavior later on down the road. It is not healthy for children. So I think there is, I'd say, be very thoughtful about how it's instituted. Some will not mind doing it at all, and often what I found is people want to have time for their stories, to get some airtime, particularly if it's happening in the context of empathy, and wanting to be a part of sharing with someone they trust who also wants to help be a part of the solution. And we all heal together as human beings, adults, children. We all are a part of the solution in healing. So one thing I said to Jameson before we started our call was the resilience piece too. So when testing for ACEs, or if you're doing an ACE survey on someone, make sure you're gauging their resilience. Also, the resilience factors, again, to have a picture of this whole human being. Because if you're only looking at the deficit side of things or the adversity side of things, you're not seeing what they may have learned to build out of that, or how they've grown from that to cope with life.
Thank you. We have another question here from Kevin. Would you say the level of arousal and performance differ depending on the sport the youth are involved in? Thinking about something like golf versus football, for example.
Yeah, I've never seen a study on it, but just kind of my gut check says yes. There's also there are different types of athletes, right? You often you're not going to see a golfer going out to be a linebacker necessarily, but I think that there are different kind of exercise phenotypes and genotypes, and you think about the hand-eye coordination and balance and speed, and how important those factors are for specific sports. So I would imagine there are some important differences, but there's some important similarities too, in that there's something around repetition, the intensity, the flow state, the connection with doing something and being willing to. I'm a tennis player. I'll go out, I'll drill all day long. I'll hit cross courts, down the lines. I love it. And it's, that would be borderline OCD for someone, for someone else. But there are certain traits that are similar, and I'd say some things that are quite different as well.
We had a follow-up question to that about that study you just referenced. How does that study measure arousal?
Oh, I said I haven't seen a study on it. I haven't seen specifically a study on it.
I see.
But I would imagine, and the important thing, even if I'm sure there are studies on this, but just thinking about it through a scientific lens, there's no average arousal, like there's no average person. So arousal for one person, for one golfer who is playing at the same level as another golfer in the same age, they may be entirely different for one football player versus another football player. So there are huge individual differences within here. And this is why it's important to really look at the individual and the story. And so, yes, there's going to be, higher levels of dopamine and adrenaline and cortisol. Exercise makes cortisol levels go up too. It's a stressor to the body. But what that biochemistry looks like is going to be individual to that person. So that's the important factor, I'd say.
Great, thanks. We have maybe time for 2 more questions. This next question, is there intersectionality of between ACEs and physical health with socioeconomic levels?
Yes, yes. And this is a, it really is a societal and a social issue that is largely shaped by economics. And if you think about this, socioeconomics of poverty and the real life factors that are contributing to the epigenome of children growing up in poverty, if they're police sirens outside, broken glass, screaming in the home, not being able to, having to move from apartment to apartment, or relatives, homeless shelter, low quality food, and good organic apple is like $2, right? Who's buying organic apples when you've got, $25 to feed the family for the week? I mean, it's so poverty is a massive stressor, and because stress is endemically higher for people living in poverty, ACEs tend to be higher as well. And this is why the concern for the quarantine, with stress being higher, there's more of these factors are coming together, and it puts higher risk of emotional or physical abuse. But certainly the stressors of poverty are profoundly impactful, and you can see studies done on ACEs, and yes, in high poverty communities, they tend to run higher. One thing I want to bring up, back to mindfulness, I'm going to keep harping on this, but I'm part of a team called the Early Childhood Innovation Network in Washington, D.C., where we work with high poverty communities in pediatric care settings and early childhood education settings. And we are helping them build skills to live healthier lives as families. One thing that has been hugely, the one thing that was the top item that people really loved and came back for and really disciplined about showing up for was mindfulness, and just taking a moment to take a breath and settle and let the dust settle. And that, gets back to the centrality of relational dynamic systems, the emotional climates. When one person can start settling down the system, the adult is usually that person, it really has profound effects on the neurophysiology of everybody else. So back to this mindfulness piece, it's something that we can give that really is a gift that pays off for life, whether it's a high socioeconomic setting or poverty.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. I'm sorry if we weren't able to get to the rest of the questions that were left in the chat. We want to definitely thank Sheila for an incredible presentation. So snaps all around for just a really,
you guys.
Happy birthday!
Yay! Also kind of give you a space for if you have any sort of wrap up, thoughts or comments or anything like that, Sheila.
And are you a Taurus or an Aries?
I'm a Taurus. My husband's an Aries. When's your birthday?
I'm the last Taurus, May 20th.
The last Taurus, got it. So I just want to big shout out to you guys for the work that you're doing. This is the on the ground work that's really important. And while academia and people like me can help bring science into the picture, you guys are putting it into, you're applying it into the lives of children. And that's really where the rubber hits the road. So I'm so impressed by what you're doing. I'm grateful to be connected with you, and I look forward to continuing to work together to really supercharge the program so that we can get out and help as many kids as we can fall in love with sports.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.